Okay, great. Can you tell me your name
My name is Peter Nolan.
and where you live?
I live at 19 Marcan Drive here in Northport, 11768.
And where were you born?
I was born in Bay Shore.
And what year was that, or what was
I
your
was
birthday?
in May 9th, 1944. That was part of, we all were born, there were four of us, we were all born in Bay Shore. So.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about your parents' background and how they met and how they came to found the Nolan Funeral Home.
Mom and Dad were both nurses at the Kings Park State Hospital. My mother came to this country in about 25, 20 someplace. Was it 20?
25 or 26.
25 or 26. She was born in Scotland. And my father's family all came from Kings Park. And they all worked in the
maiden name?
O'Rourke. She came from Scotland, but she's a really Irish family. My grandfather was a coal miner in Ireland, and he migrated to Scotland. And then my grandfather and two uncles came to this country. They thought, as many people did, they thought the streets were paved with gold. So my two uncles and grandfather came, and they were going to Pennsylvania to be coal miners, which that's all they knew. And they stopped to visit my grandfather's sister, Mrs. Flynn, from Kings Park. Needless to say, they never left. They all got a job in the hospitals. My one uncle was a chef. My other uncle was a nurse, and my grandfather worked as a mason there. And then my mother and grandmother and two other aunts came to this country a couple years later.
What were your parents' names?
My mother was Anne Teresa O'Rourke, married Nolan, and my dad was James P. Really, there was a discussion when my father was born. My grandfather, who I didn't know, wanted to name him Patrick, and everybody said they'll call him Patty. Well, by the time they got to the christening and my grandmother wasn't well, then they named him James. That's the lore of the family. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but that's the way it went.
And then how did your parents meet?
They both worked in the state hospital, and that was Kings Park. I mean, they all, it was just a place they all worked in. My mother became a nurse, and my father also was a nurse. And they worked together. They didn't work together, but my father used to say that they would have nursing students come out from the city, and every 6 months there'd be another 20 or 30 of them. And finally he settled down and married my mom. And, it's an interesting town. It was a hospital town. Everybody worked in the hospital, and many things that I had an Uncle Joe. He took all the toys. He was a carpenter, and he'd take all the toys that you had, or bikes, in November, and he'd fix them all up. And by Christmas time, you thought you got a new bike. There was a lot of neighborhood work done for the community. It was a steady job, a steady employment. You're never going to get rich, but they always had a place to sleep and a place to work. And a lot of the hospital was custodial care. It was a psychiatric hospital. It was Kings Park State Hospital. Then they changed the name to Kings Park Psychiatric Center. And,
what do you think made your father look into the funeral directing business?
The story goes like this: that there was a lot of not working too hard, or there was also a consumption of cold liquids. And he told the story that he wanted to be promoted. And he went down to the boss and he said, I want to be promoted. And they were all very heavily Irish neighborhood. And the boss said, well, everybody in Kings Park called my father Jimmy. And they said, well, Dwyer, Flynn, and O'Brien have been here longer than in the civil service system. My father said, well, Dwyer, Flynn, and O'Brien are not exactly hard workers, and they consume a lot of liquids during the day, which is not appropriate. And my father just said he just couldn't wait long enough. And he always said to me later in life that he had to make a move by the time he was 35. And once you got in the retirement system, you know, you were not stuck there, but you were, and it wasn't a great movement. There was only so many jobs there, and I went to work for the Clayton Funeral Home in Kings Park. Mr. Bill Clayton, who was also the Republican leader of the town of Smithtown. My father worked under him for a couple of years, and then he decided that Northport needed a funeral director, and came here in 1948. And as you well know, we've been here ever since, thank God.
Right.
Yeah.
And they purchased the building, or did they have it built?
No, he purchased the property on the corner of Laurel and Main. It was a vacant lot. I can't think who he bought it from. He bought it for $5,000. And over the years, he expanded. He bought a house on Main Street, which he tore down and made a little bit more of a parking lot. And then before that, he bought a house on Laurel right next, which is the parking lot from, there was two elderly ladies there, the Paffey sisters, who my mother used to go over and take care of, and they were old maids. And that's the way Daddy, progressed. And he built the building in 48 with one room, and then in 58 he built a building to the south of it, built a room to the south, and in 68 he built a big room to the west of the building. So that's most of the construction. We all lived upstairs. The big problem is you had to be quiet a lot of times. To keep the dog quiet, because downstairs was rather a quiet place of business. And
how many siblings did you have?
I was the youngest of four, and my older brother Jimmy was my partner for about probably 40 years. Jimmy and I worked together. I have a sister, Jean, who lives in Philadelphia. Left Northport with a friend. Went to work for a law firm in Philadelphia for years, and she still lives there. She's a character. And I have a brother, Tommy, who lives in Smithtown. And then I'm the youngest. I'm the baby of the family.
What schools did you attend in Northport?
We all attended St. Philip Neri School, the elementary school. We'd walk down from the corner and then go to school there for 8 years. And then we finished school there. I went to the Northport High School, which was at that time on Middleville Road. I think it's a junior, I'm pretty sure it's a junior high now. And graduated, come out of there, finished school there. Then I attended Simmons School of Funeral Directing, a private school in Syracuse in 62 and 63. The school was no longer existing. The state of New York got into, it was a private school, the state of New York got into the Bureau of Funeral Directing, and they opened a couple of schools in upstate New York. And there's also a private school in New York, which my brother Jimmy went to, American Academy. But my father thought I needed to get away, or I don't know why. He said, this is where you ought to go. And you're 18 years old, you don't argue with your father much.
Did you always feel like that was something that you wanted to do? You knew you were going to take over the business, or was there something else?
Yeah, well, you lived upstairs, and we always told the story that my dad would leave with a funeral, and we'd always go downstairs and fold up the chairs, fold up the flower racks, and we had a carpet sweep. We'd have a vacuum cleaner. My brother and I, were about 10 years ago, we did exactly the same thing. I said, Jimmy, we're doing real well. We have a vacuum cleaner now. But we lived upstairs. Downstairs was just part of our house and our living. And then Jimmy and I sort of just fell into it. My brother Tommy really wanted no part of it. My sister was my sister. Let's leave it at that.
Tell me a little bit about like high school and things that you and your friends would do for fun. What was it like on Main Street back then? And I guess this would have been the 60s or the 60s.
My older brother Jimmy sort of cut the way, made things easy for me, because my parents were rather, like any parents, are strict. They don't know how to raise a child. They're going to do the best they can. And I forget, they give him like 35 or 40 cents. He could go to the movies Friday night or Saturday night. Then you either go to an ice cream shop, which is still here, Paneritas, get a soda and come home by 9:30. And I was the youngest. They say, 4 or 5 years later, come home at a reasonable time. It was sort of very easy for me. I was lucky. They experimented with Jimmy and Jean. And the other thing that the village was village was very quiet those days. It was really the most important part of the village, or the most part of the village was Steers, sand and gravel there. That was the major employer of the village. And if you didn't go down Bayview Avenue at 4:30 when they were coming home, I remember as a kid, you could see, we belonged to the yacht club, you could see on a busy day 30, 40, 50 trucks of sand go up James Street. I mean, it's completely different. It's all residential, and Steers has become a beautiful place to live down in, some people call it Northport Bay Estates. The late Bob Howard, who was the chief here for years, used to call it Northport Bay Estates, but nobody else did. I think for many people it was called the Pit, but it's the condos, and they've done, I mean, I remember as a kid, Steers Avenue, which they used to have drag races on Sunday going towards Ocean Avenue. It was up the big hill. The cars would always stop. But I mean, there was nothing down there. It was absolutely barren land, like a dust bowl. But they reclaimed the property, and they gave some property to the village. Steers did. My dad was on the village board in the 50s, and if you left Steers alone, they would have gone to Waterside Avenue and the Long Island Sound. But better heads prevailed, and they stayed where they were. I mean, we were a kid, we had a little boat, and always out in the harbor there were 20, 30, or 40 barges being waited to be filled with sand and taken to New York City for building of the bridges and building of New York City, whatever development was going on. There's the Verrazano Bridge and the Throgsneck Bridge were built with the sand, they always said, from Steers. Steers was very good to the community. He gave us, property was just nothing down there. He gave a lot of land to the fire department, which we had the annual fair every year. And then the northwest corner, east corner, where the village has the baseball fields, that was also Steers' property. And it really was barren land, but it's become a part of our village. The village itself is, changed a lot. I mean, since I was a child, the corner of Woodbine and Main Street was a development. It was a Quackenbush property, had a 99-year lease in the town of Huntington. And that moved over after the lease expired. It changed into a recreation and parking area for the village. So.
Right. Did you ever come across Jack Kerouac when he lived here?
No. He lived a couple of blocks from the funeral home on Cherry Street, I think. Cherry or Gilbert. I think his headquarters was close to downtown near a watering hole called Club G. And my brothers, they were they frequented there a little bit at their young age. And I think it was Nick and Babe Arata owned it, and they had a nickname for it called the Piggery. I didn't. That was not my place to. That was not my place to be, or I just never went there. But they always tell the story. They wait for the policeman to come up the street and then walk out and put the nickel or the dime in the meter just to make his life. That was part of growing up, I guess. My two brothers.
And what other things in the community did you get involved with? I know you were involved with the fire department.
Yeah. The fire department my dad was a fireman, my brother Jimmy was a fireman, my brother Tommy were. I just thought it'd be a good place to give some service to the community. I just celebrated 60 years with them. I'm more of a, what do you need? I'm not really running into fires, but I've met some good people there, some people I've become lifelong friends with. Another way to serve the community. It's the community's been very good to our family and everybody, and I just thought it was a way to start, and I'm still sticking with it.
And what made you want to become mayor of the village?
I guess partly ego, and the guy was mayor. In fact, the lady who was the first president of the Historical Society, Mrs. Campbell, her husband was mayor. And I guess I decided that I'd give it a try. But I figured something out, that in the village they have election every 2 years, and the odd year is the 2 trustees. So myself and Buddy Lewis, he ran. He was already a trustee, and I was elected there. And that gave me an opportunity for 2 years to figure out what was going on, how the village was run, and who you thought were good employees and who were people you had to keep an eye on, or trusted, more trustworthy than you thought. So it gave me a good ability to walk through it. And I decided I'd give this a shot here. And I guess partly ego and partly my community love of this community. Yeah, a couple of guys said to me downtown, "Why don't you run?" And fine, I said, "I'll give it a try." Jack was a good man. Jack Campbell was honest. I mean, of all the people I met in government, there was never ever a bit of something they did something wrong or take something, or it was just I hate to say this, I had more friends than he did. That's really belonged to the fire department, and belonged to this and belonged to that. And Jack was a good man, and I just.
And that was 1978 that you became mayor.
Yeah.
And you were mayor for 20 years. So I would think that between 1978 to 1998, there were a lot of changes in the village. I mean, just that period of time in world history was, kind of very, just a pivotal time where it really, went up through a lot of changes. So what kind of things did you witness in Northport that changed the most, you think?
I say that with sincerity. The lady who was the village clerk was Dorothy Dugan, who was our neighbor on Main Street. She was a lovely lady, and she was probably the most. Every time you had a question, she had the answers. She was here for years. And the old village hall, which was where the new village hall was, she worked up under Kip Van Pelt, who was the village clerk for years. And she knew everything. And then the one great story about Dorothy, when the budget would come up, and we had a fellow on the village board named Kevin Condit who did the budget with Dorothy. And Dorothy would very quietly say that you can, whatever you got to do in the budget is fine. We give some money to the band in the park in July, Kruger's band. Don't touch that. My niece is in it. That was the only thing that she ever asked. I never asked for anything. I always tell the story that Dottie Dugan could sit next to Mother Teresa and Adolf Hitler. She was just a lovely, lovely lady. She was our neighbor for years and years and years. The whole Dugan family. I think the village changed. Not changed, but once Steers closed, I think the village became a little. There was a lot of vacant stores in the 60s and 70s downtown, but the power plant also left. When they got that all down, and I was fortunate enough to get involved with the town of Huntington and community development, and they did. As you well know, or maybe not know, the 2 parks downtown are owned by the town of Huntington and leased to the village, and the village. Leased the property where they tore down everything, which was on the corner of Woodbine and Main Street. There was an ice house, there was Cassam's, there were a boathouse, the Lil Coke plant came down, there was Choi's Laundry, and there was a shoemaker on the corner. I think the post office was there once, but they all came down, and then through money we got from the town of Huntington and with community development and community input, we built that park down there, and parking was a necessity for this village to thrive. You can always have more parking. And that was probably one of our longest goals, to try to get that done. And we finally did. And we bought the property, the village bought the property in back of the Lilco building, which is now where the Ritz and a couple of places are. And there was a big tank there. Bruce Davis owned it from Davis Aircraft, which was a publishing house, and he sold it to the village. I think we used community development money again to dismantle the tank and then build parking, which you need to have a vibrant community. And we're in a valley. You just can't. There's just not there's not enough room. You know, villages topography is what it is, but we survived. And we had a chief when I was first mayor. We had a chief of police, Percy Urban. He retired and went to work for the village down the park. And then John Trunzo was here, and Bob Howard, who were, two great leaders of our police department, which is a very intricate part of our village, I think. And the fire department, as I said, I remember for years. The village, then it started to come back little by little. And I don't mean to say this, but years ago, the watering hole at the corner of Main Street and Woodbine was not exactly a place you could, it wasn't any food. It was just all alcohol and skippers. And the family that owned it, I know them. And they were, but the two brothers ran it, and they ran it. If they felt like closing anytime, they just closed. And then Murphy's wasn't a great place. Those days also, the village had a lot of clam diggers and more clam diggers, and then they got into lobster and some of them. And as you well know, George Dahl was our mayor for many years, 50, I think, three terms. So the village, the occupations have changed. The village has become a destination sometime for people to come. You get a nice warm day. The market and the farmers market's done very, very well for the village. I was there a couple of years ago and I buying donuts. Some guy said, "Hey, how are you?" I didn't know the guy well. He lives in Carl Place. He comes every weekend to come out here just for a ride. He and his wife. My dad used to say that we have the most beautiful front door in the world. This harbor is it's second to none, really. It's a nice, beautiful.
Definitely a special.
Yeah, between the yacht club and the Seymour's and the marina, which I hope the town will fix up sooner or later. The village changed when Steers closed. They developed that property down there. That's the way the village has gone. It's done fairly very well, I think. And the hotel, I think, is just a great asset. And the theater and the hotel. And there's many nice restaurants that you can go to. Skipper's, Main Street, the rest of them there. They've done very well, I think. And you can say thanks to the hotel. I mean, the hotel made people come, but I think the theater made more people come every day, sometimes twice, afternoon, evening shows. And it's built the village to a great place to live. We've been here since 1948, so I hope we're not going anyplace.
Not for a while.
And tell me about how you met your wife, Lori.
Myself and 10 guys rented a summer house out in Hampton Bays, right next to the Coast Guard station on Lighthouse Road. And Lori was summering out there with her girlfriends, and I met her at a place.
And what year was that?
1970. Yeah. Lori was going to graduate school in Washington, and she was up here with her girlfriends working in a restaurant. And I would come out on weekends, and I met her, and it took a while. I moved on, and we...
And what year did you get married? What was your anniversary?
72.
1972.
We got married up in Westchester, St. Philip, Peter and James?
St. Peter and Paul.
St. Peter and Paul, the parish where Lori's family were from Westchester for a long time, and my father-in-law worked for U.S. Steel, and U.S. Steel moved everybody back to Pittsburgh, and we had a discussion about where we were going to get married. I didn't think Pittsburgh was too far, and she thought, well, neutral ground would be in Westchester and church up there, and that's where we got married. Yeah.
And who are your children? How many children and grandchildren do you have?
We have one child, Erin, who was born 81. Very good. It took a while. And
does she live in Northport?
no, she lives up in Westchester with her. I'll very proudly say she went to Northport schools, did very well there. and she graduated from Harvard, and she married a guy from her high school class, and he was a graduate of Annapolis. They lived in California for a while, then New York City, and now they live in Westchester, up in Scarsdale. They have two beautiful grandchildren, Lucy and Freddie, who are the apple of our eyes. And that's we've been going. Lori goes up every Wednesday to visit them and leaves me alone all by myself. Oops.
Fire department.
Do you have to go?
Do you have to go?
No, I don't have to go. That's probably an ambulance call.
What would you say is like your proudest accomplishment, either as being mayor or with the funeral home or as a parent, or anything come to mind that we can end on? Or a couple of things that you're proud of.
I mean, the love of my life, 52 years, 53?
53
October. Happily married, our child and our grandchildren, our son-in-law. And I didn't retire till about the age of 75. I enjoyed what I did, helping people through some tough times. And people say, you're the mayor. Oh yeah, how does it take? I said, it wasn't that time consuming. It was a couple hours a week. And it really was just part of the community, which I love, and I thought I could serve it better. And we had a great police department. It was a great place to live, and I plan on living here the rest of my life. Hopefully, if not, we'll see what happens. But
so you would think that running the funeral home is your proudest.
Yeah, taking over. My father instilled a lot of good things in us, and my brother Jimmy and I we never fought. I mean, you see brothers and sisters didn't get along, blah, blah, blah. And Jimmy and I worked together for almost at least 40 years. We never, we got along. We just figured out how to do it.
And what year did he pass away?
Jimmy passed away 3 years ago. Yeah, Mark's father.
And now Mark and Nora.
Yeah. Yeah, but my brother Jimmy, his wife passed away 5 weeks before he did, so Mark had a tough time, and he's done very, very well. I'm very proud of him. He and Nora and their 3 kids. Nora's very, very involved in a lot of things, which is great, and so is Mark. And he's very active in our state association, which my brother Jimmy was also president of, and Mark will be president of the association in 2 or 3 years. It's held at Saratoga in the middle of race season. It's very nice to go up there. But I really enjoyed, work. I never really thought it was work. It was sort of a service that we gave the community as a
very important service.
Yeah, well, it's just been a great community to us. There was another funeral home here in town, and Mr. Howe, who owned the funeral home, he joined us, came over here as a partner in '85, and we moved on from there, and it just became a place of we always got along, everybody, and we had a couple of employees in there, and my brother Jimmy did the books. I was one of the outside guy. A little bit of malarkey, and moved on, and got along with everybody. And my father told me one thing: make friends, not enemies. I mean, that's just the way it is. Daddy always told the story about Daddy when he first started. It's a business that's tough to start, and he used to go across the street to the Midway and use the dime and to go make sure the phone worked. I mean, it was very quiet, but he persevered, and my mother and father worked at it. And we sort of just followed along, folding up the chairs and vacuuming the room.
What years did your parents pass away? Do you remember?
Daddy died in
98.
98, and Mommy died in 93. Yeah, Mom was sick for a while, and Daddy also got sick with cancer on the jaw. Last year or two was tough on him, and it wasn't any fun, but he persevered, and he always had a great outlook on life. Daddy did. he was really, you know, that's who I learned everything from, my start anyway, until I met her. I learned more things.
All right, great. Let's stop it there. Thank you so much.